Okay, we are recording. So today, actually, can you talk a little bit?
A little bit.
Talking a little bit. Okay.
Uh,
Okay, I mean just increasing the audio here. Okay.
all right.
Today we're gonna do part three, which is gonna be a single session, the entirety of part three, especially
Yeah,
because it's
this
only.
part is really short.
Yeah. So this part is very interesting to me because if you swap like not this, but at the end of it, like if you swap some words in this, you're gonna be and you replace them with some vibe coding in AI. The semantics fit perfectly, and you can directly paste that on LinkedIn.
Huh.
And I find that to be pretty interesting. So um, this first essay here is talking about, how can I say? It's talking about the whole economic crisis and anxiety that people have when, or they're actually talking about two things. It's talking about the economic anxiety and crisis that people want, seem to want to have about being replaced by some new tool, by some new toy that is on the market. That's the first thing it talks about. And then it also talks about how the fear that some people have about the destruction of something that they care because of those new tools. So those are the two things that I think it touches. Do you think there's anything else?
Uh, that's pretty much it, I think.
Yeah. Um. Okay. So which? Yeah. So here he's basically saying that the people working on the Manhattan Project, if they knew the destructive power, they probably would have thought twice about it before doing it. Um. And then the examples that he's talking about is networks and hypertext, which is kind of funny in a way because well that's so like years ago. Um, blah blah blah. Where is the portion that I should start reading at? Yeah. Okay. So in a particular conference, Paul Zimmer said that they were headed to a storm. There was a storm in the horizon. With computers now being able to display text reasonably well on the screen, with screens becoming better and smaller and more portable, with networks being better and more available, with authors being able to write and produce their own texts to send them out over networks, the role of the editor and publisher could vanish. Soon, there could be no intermediaries between the author and his or her audience. Worse, distribution could become a matter of software distribution companies providing floppy disks containing unedited and unselected stories, books, and poems.
Man, floppy disks.
Yeah, floppy disks, but like it's actually I didn't think of this when I was reading it, but this happened, right? Like actually
Yep.
this always, well it well how can I say, part of the effect of this happened, but we still have we still have editors and publishers. Like that didn't happen, especially partially because I think what Gabriel will say later, that I would pay for it. I would pay to have a selection going on for me. So partially because of that, but the side effect that happened is now that uh, the amount of noise increased.
Yeah, publishing is so easy nowadays over the internet that like there's a bunch of stuff out there.
Yeah, part of the one of the few benefits of something being hard to accomplish is that the ones that do accomplish, that did accomplish it, there is some sort of standard expectations.
Right.
And with the, how can I say? I think the modern way to say it is the democratization of something. When that
Yeah,
happens, yeah, when that happens, everything goes to it's cheaper to make, but the bar goes to the floor.
yeah. I really don't like that word, democratization.
Yeah, no, no, let's not go
Especially,
into it. Let's not go into it. It's gonna get controversial, but I also don't like that word. Okay, so Zimmer added that part of the repulsion for him is the thought of people not being able to sit quietly and warmly in a warmly lit room, in a comfortable chair, reading words beautifully written in a nicely typed set of real paper. Yeah, so this is the destruction of a particular experience that the new technology is gonna change it in order to be a commodity. It's going to actually change how things work. And sometimes the previous experience is more, it's valued on itself, right? So the fact that it's uh, printed in real paper makes a difference. I agree with that thought process. I actually buy books, and I actually want to have the physical copy, even even though there are like drawbacks. For example, when I move, I'm gonna have to put those books in a box and travel with them, and that's kind of annoying. If they were like only digital, only like a Kindle form, I would be able to not have to do that, and that's nice.
I mean, but in the worst case scenario, you can always just print the books yourself.
I
Printers
thought
exist, you know?
I thought you would say in the best case scenario you just don't move.
No, that's the best case scenario. I'm talking about the worst case. The worst case is, well, you just print the books.
But
Like,
that's not
printers
that
are
that's
a thing.
that's not the same. That's not the same thing. For example, um, the type of paper, the texture of paper, and the size of it. If you want to be able to do this properly, a printer will not be able to just do that. You're gonna have to buy extra tooling to do that. So that's not the same thing. And if you want the specific types of paper, probably you're gonna have to buy expensive printers. Um,
Well, that just means there's any economic incentive for the printing of books to continue, no?
no, but that's the thing. People would have to want that. They would have to go through the hassle of, okay, I actually will incentive the market to allow me to buy a printer that prints in particular sheets of paper. I'm gonna have to buy different types of paper sheet. I'm gonna have to buy the other tooling to make it fold properly.
No, no, but I mean, the fact that all of that is a kind of a hassle, that incentivizes businesses to form around that and say, okay, uh, we're going to be a print house. We print books that you give us digitally.
Yeah, but that
So you
already
don't have to
exists.
bother with all that.
Yeah, but that's already true. Like I can actually go walking by foot 3 minutes from here, and there's a place there where I can just say, do this. Like it's not gonna be arbitrarily. Like I can't just say, okay, I actually want these dimensions for my book. They won't be able to do it. I have to provide them the thing formatted in a particular way. But it's 3 minutes from here. That already exists. So the incentives worked. The texture and the feeling of the thick sheets of paper between the fingers, the visible thickness of the ink, all would be gone. You could see Zimmer shudder behind the podium at the vision of people sitting with small computers on their laps reading poetry. So again, we're talking about two different problems here, which is the particular roles being vanished, which is this is a cycle in technology advancement. So every time this happens, a lot of people get mad about this. And then the second problem that we're talking about is about the experience being changing for the worse. He argued that not everyone will want to read books on computers, but enough would to force up the price of real books to the point where the market might completely vanish. Well,
Which
this
is,
happened. This actually happened, but the other part didn't happen. At least not yet.
If the price is going up, that means you can make a profit there. So why would the market vanish?
Because if the costs to make the real books profitable start increasing due to, for example, lack of popularity of people wanting physical books, and you double down with making people more poor with economic crisis and inflation, there will be a double force going to the direction of Kindle, for example. And if you have a subscription of Kindle Unlimited, actually there's a lot of books that are free digitally. So that would, on the most dystopian scenario, would actually make very little sense to actually print real books, right? Because the cost would be fucked up, and the demand would also be fucked up. Like it's the double force towards the extinction of it. But again, this is very dystopian. Like this is very, um, I would say, the world is ending. People are a lot of shit happened that should not have happened, but it did. Um, he did not think that the benefits of computer-assisted reading justify the elimination of the university presses and possibly even some commercial publishers. He also worried that the implied elimination of the editor would eventually diminish the quality of the writing to a point where people will not want to read anymore. Well, again, this is basically the noise increase. The noise to usefulness ratio got worse.
Noise to
Well,
signal, right?
yeah, noise to signal. Well, noise to signal, noise to usefulness. It got worse. Gets worse every time. Every time something gets becomes a commodity, the ratio uh, of this in that particular market share, that will get worse.
Well,
It's
that's just Sturgeon's law, no?
what do you mean?
Sturgeon's law is 90% of everything is crap.
But that's the thing. I don't think that's true if the thing is uncommoditized. Like
Well,
if you
yes, but for the
if
things that are, you
oh,
know.
of course, if the things are very cheap to produce, then the noise goes to the skyrockets to probably 90 plus percent. It seems obvious to me on reflection that publishers should be eager to embrace new technology as long as there is a place in it for them. Certainly, I don't look forward to trying to find the few good books among an unselected, unedited morass of self-published trash. We couldn't expect reviewers to take on the task of slogging through such large quantities. Therefore, it would have seemed that the role of publisher editor would re-emerge in perhaps a different format. And I, for example, would gladly subscribe to a group of publisher editors for reading material if they were the alternative. Perhaps reviewers would be willing to review material selected and edited in such a form. I also would like to highlight this because, again, we are seeing a lot of people fearing the end of programmers because of AI. And if anything, this sentence will be true for programmers, for the software development here.
You know, it's kind of ironic because a lot of people feared about other things vanishing because of programming, incidentally, right? And now it's the programmer's turn. But yeah,
Oh
we
no,
both know it's not
that
quite like that, right?
that definitely happened. No, yeah, but if you think about it, some of their fears of the past happen. For example, oh, you can actually use cameras and a self-service something on the supermarket, and you can remove the role of the person that does the checkout, right? And you can do that yourself, and you can use cameras to monitor you or whatever. That actually did happen, and that was basically programming, right? It's a piece of hardware, and there's a software running in there, and there's software running on the cameras, and that did happen. So I'm not saying that every single potential fear that people have will never happen. I'm just saying that if anything happens, this is still true. So it's not that the role will exactly. Well, sometimes they do disappear, right? If the self-service thingy becomes worldwide in every supermarket, all of those roles will be vanished. But sometimes the role still exists, but it changed in format. So, for example, if people start doubling down on 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 using AI for programming, in the worst case scenario, that will change the format of programmers because we will stop being makers and we're going to be exclusively debuggers. We're going to actually go there to fix whatever the AI spilled out. That would
Are we
change
though?
the atmosphere, right?
Are we though? Because like, if you think about it, how do you specify what exactly you want the code that the AI spits out will do?
Oh yeah, we're gonna have to do a little bit of design for sure. We're gonna have to do a little bit of design for sure. But the code would be, as I imagine, the code would be already there, right? You're not gonna have to write that yourself for the first time, and that's part of doing design because when you design something and you start writing about it, you may actually find flaws in it. So there's a negative feedback loop happening when you write what you initially designed, because you're gonna find artifacts when writing that will change the design, and that creates a feedback loop. We're not gonna have that anymore because it's gonna be already written.
But who's going to? Well, the AI is going to write the initial version of the code, right?
And there's another thing. If
But
something
how
is
do you?
already written, we now we have the problem of maybe be biased with it, because we're
Right.
gonna read it, and that will be it's gonna be like a blank sheet of paper. It's gonna be there already, so that may actually have some influence on us.
Yes, but that's not quite the point I'm getting at. Like, okay, you tell the AI, I want to do X, Y, and Z. But then you look at the code that it generates and it's like, yeah, that's not quite what I want. So you have to enter in, you go into more detail, right?
Oh, but you're assuming that somebody went into detail. I am assuming that they wrote it. It worked for 80. Let's actually be very, very generous. Let's put 85%. 85% of the cases it worked, and then they discovered the 15% 3 years later that, oh, actually this 15% they were just ignored, and the AI is not being able to help. It's just hallucinating with the 15%. We're gonna have to hire someone to fix this. That's the scenario that I'm thinking of. So
Mm,
it would change the format in which we act on, because we would be hired basically as a bunch of plumbers, right? So you have something is wrong with your plumbing in your apartment. I don't know, it's spitting water all over the place, and then you hire someone to fix that. If if we go to the dystopian future that some people want, we're gonna be doing plumbing fixing all day, essentially. So they did something. It's spilling water all over the place, and we go there and we fix it. We're gonna have to understand what's the problem. We're gonna have to understand, like I said, there's gonna be a little bit of design, a little bit, but it's not gonna be the full feedback loop process of doing engineering. Essentially, we're gonna actually have to do patch ups. It's a patch up life. Um, but it fits with this sentence. It would change. It would re-emerge in a different format, in a worse format, but in a different format. Um, okay. Anyway, so like I said, this still has economic incentive to not make it disappear. So for the case of publishers and editors, I think this is pretty clear. Uh, so even though I can see that its role is necessary, the publishers and editors are too spooked by the technology to think it through. Maybe if we're able to communicate better the limitations of our technology, we could reduce the panic, or at least encourage a dialogue with people like Paul Zimmer. And now we're going to go with the hypertext. He said that hypertext meant that books and stories would become disjointed, incoherent jumbles, barely comprehensible and recognizable as literature. So again, this is fear of a particular piece of technology changing the experience of something for the worse. From what I knew about the uses of hypertext in documentation and programming environments, this just didn't connect with reality. Then I started to read about hyperfixation in which text spaces are linked together in a variety of ways by the author, by the reader, or by a process, often a random process. This implies that each text is actually a group of texts and that various stories or plots emerge from a single source. To Zimmer, this could be very well a necessary result of the technology, that disconnected texts there are what we intended the technology for. Of course, this isn't true. Like many accidental media, artists are bound to try to use each new medium as well as they can. There are, at best, only a few writers right now who are capable of putting together any text that can be viewed in multiple ways, and though there may be a curiosity factor today that compels people to read such texts, and though there may be a feeling of poking through someone else's life or reading a text in which the hypertext allows the reader to explore different parts of the created world, the art must rise to a level deserving a larger readership. So essentially, he's saying that, and this also makes sense, in the beginning of anything new, people will explore it, try it a little bit. They will make mistakes, and there may be situations that they're actually making things worse. But that's not um, that is not necessarily the end result of that after it matures on the market. Uh, but it's understandable. This fear is understandable. So that's what I get from this. Yes.
Uh, it's funny that he's mentioning synthesizers after that.
Yeah, yeah. Then we're gonna go to the art is at this stage similar to the early synthesizers. The emphasis on playing with the technology and exploring its limits, rather than making the technology subservient to the art. At the current stage, one can rightly ask, what's art? Remember those early synthesizer recordings with beeps and signs and bubbling burps? It was fun and entertaining to hear sounds we had never heard before, but it was we heard them, the novelty wore off. So it is with hypertext, and maybe this is with AI too. Like
Man, I will be very happy when the hype wears off.
Like maybe people are just trying to poke it as hard as they freaking can to see how far they can go. So they are literally having this experience of okay, this is actually something new. Let's hear for the 20th time the same burp as before because this is still new. But at some point it's gonna wear off, right? Uh, but there is another there is something more. How can I say? The investment though, like I think one of the differences between the synthesizers and the AI is that the synthesizer can't really be extrapolated to like you don't need to invest into it. It's just a matter of finding the right way to use it. But if you commit to it, you're not going to cause any harm. You're just doing sounds for free. But in the case of AI, that's not really true. If you invest into it, you may fire a lot of people and just start using AI for everything. And after the hype dies and you discover what you have done, there will be some damages. You're gonna have to do damage control. So I see the synthesizer as less harmful if you just double down early on. If you double down on AI early on, I think you're gonna actually have damages after. So that's one thing.
Hmm.
How can Paul Zimmer really know that this is what's going on? How can he fail to put the two technologies together, seeing the unchallenged shallowness of current hyperfiction, seeing that there will be no useful role for an editor or of such work because it is so bad, seeing that the world is being led by the nose by technology to a future with no quality, no literature, only a future with people playing with technology the, the way some people mindlessly channel or net surf. And that's a very valid question, right? So how can he conclude that? And the answer is pretty obvious. We need to. explain things better. So the entire end of this is essentially Gabriel saying, that's why I said this is copy pastable to LinkedIn pretty much one to one, and you just replace hypertext with AI because it is our duty to help people understand our technology and our intentions for its use. Of course, our intentions are only part of what determines how it is used, but unless we get people like Paul Zimmer to see its good uses and to help shape the future, they may resist and appear foolish in doing so. And perhaps this will help Paul's nightmare scenario come true. So again, if you don't explain things properly to people, they think it's the we are doomed. They think it's the end of time. They think it's the end of uh, uh, an entire market or something like that. And I think this happens because of misunderstanding of what something is and what it isn't, and what it's good for and what it's not so good for. And because of this lack of explanation, people think of the worst. And I think that, like I said, this is pretty much like AI, but the AI situation, but from the past, and less crazy, I guess, because the hypertext is not that insane.
This will probably happen again when the next big thing after AI comes around.
Sure, I believe we have more of a duty to represent technology to the world than we have assumed until now. For example, the public doesn't really know what software is like, what we think about when we do our work. Think of the books on computers. For the most part, they are user guides, extravagant books about the promises of artificial intelligence, and books that talk about ones and zeros and how simple logic drives computers. Does this sound like what we do for a living? Do we push bits? Do we use simple logic? Do we have much to do with the promises of artificial intelligence or user guide? No, we deal with complex programming languages, inheritance, polymorphism, abstractions. Think about how much people know about the physics and evolution based on popular books. No one could find out what we do at the level from the books out there, from the books out there
Out there
there
today.
today. I How can I say? I think this is true to some extent, but I think Gabriel is missing a point here. The reason, the reason that at least on his time, there were more books about bits and logic is because that's the foundation, right? Like, how can we explain to them these things if they don't really know this? Like, I can understand you want to skip the hardware, so you want to skip the ones and the zeros. Like, you don't want to explain the electric circuits involved. You don't want to explain the physics. I can understand that. Well, I do know
But
them because I did the computer engineering. But let's say that we want to ignore them. Sure, but how
you
can
still
you
need to know simple logic to do much of anything interesting.
exactly? So the reason that these like you can say that we deal with complex programming languages, inherent polymorphism, and abstractions. Sure, we do that daily, but it is embedded. It is built on top of simple logic anyway. Maybe he's talking about Boolean, no, like circuit Boolean logic, like he's talking about shors and nands and stuff like that. Um, which, if he's talking about that, then I can kind of see his point. But simple logic, you must have that for understand pretty much everything else. Um, but I do agree with him that this disconnection between what we really do and what people think we might do, that gap can't be that large because otherwise there will be a misrepresentation. And then if you sum that up with the people not being able to tell what we then explain what we do, then the fears and the nightmares start to make a lot more sense because first, the literature that we are providing them is incorrect, and we are not speaking the truth about what we do. So then we can't blame them that they think that we're doing something else. Makes sense. Um, For technology visible to the public, we should provide examples. We should talk about the best uses and clearly explain and illustrate them. We should seek out those professions and industries that are most affected. Take the time not only to explain what we're doing, but also to invite them into the process early on. At first, I thought that Zimmer hadn't taken the time to read up all the technology in his position silly. But then I looked at his evidence and his conclusions made sense. But because we had not given him the facts, let's think a little bit more about what we do. Yeah, so essentially, responsibility and accountability. So we need to explain ourselves. We need to be good at explaining ourselves, what we do. We need to be responsible about writing about what we do. Then there were the two fears. Technology bringing new experiences to something that may be different than the previous experience, and we should talk about them being worse, such as the real sheets of paper and reading things on the computer, and also the economic thing that people always are fear of. I'm gonna lose my job because technology. So yeah, we talked about all of these in what, 4 pages or something? Five?
Yeah, this is very condensed, I should say.
Yeah, I would say so. And then finally, this is the last thing about what we do, writing broadside. So this is essentially a manifesto that everybody should be writing more. Which I don't know about you. This is the type of this remind me of when you were a child. Well, this is probably not the case for you, Marinho, because you are a vegetarian. But for a lot of kids, including myself included, this reminded me of when my mom was telling me for years when I was a child about you should eat more vegetables, and you're not reading your vegetables. Like it's that voice that keeps telling you should be doing obviously good better things. So you're talking about eating healthy or and doing exercise and reading and writing and understanding the language that you're born with. So like the basics that everyone, I'm not gonna say everyone, but a lot of people think it's boring. I, for example, I'm not a very vegetables person, and I know that's bad. But I do have the conscience, I do have the voice inside of my head now telling me that I should eat them. This
Mm.
manifesto reminded me of that because it's essentially repeating itself over and over and over, saying, write it. You should write it more. Practice writing. Read about writing. Debate about writing. Write, 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 write. Uh, which is again, I think this is a pretty obvious thing. So you can make the argument that we use natural language to communicate. How the fuck are we not interested in improving our ability to use it better? So of course, even given that assumption, we should write and read more. But he's making a stronger argument that this is our profession, right? So in order to communicate things properly, you need to be able to. Well, in order to pass information properly, you need to communicate properly. So a man who has the knowledge but lacks the power to clearly to express it is no better off than he never had any ideas at all. You know what this reminded me of? This is gonna like we're gonna jump into a tangent and immediately go back to the topic. Remember the premises that Hoppa established for his thing, and one of the premises that you have to have somebody else in the process.
Right.
This reminded me of that. This reminded me of that. Because at first I didn't get it why he made that assumption. Why, like, I can make something logically sound without ever communicating that into anyone. But there are two reasons that's not a good thing. The first is that how do you know you are not going insane? Because if you are using only the confines of your head, maybe you have convinced yourself that some absurdities are logically sound. So you're using the other apparatus of other people to see if your reasoning is the real is reasoning actually, because you may be going psychopathic, you may be going insane. And the second reason is, I think it's maybe this is the reason that he thought,
There's
go.
there's a more fundamental reason, Lemos.
But we can go over that
What?
later. Go.
No, no. I'm just going to ask you a question. What's the point of private property if you are the only person in existence?
Yeah, no, I understand that applied to the particular problem of private property, but I'm talking more about making an argument. You don't need, in theory, you don't need anybody else, any third parties, to validate the soundness of your argument. And that's what I think it makes it like, it's kind of weird. Like, why is that premise in there? I agree that in the case of private property, that seems like a rule that came from that particular domain. It didn't came from the domain of arguments. It came from a subset of that. Because from an argument point of view, if I make an argument and I'm the only person on earth and I'm using logic soundly, it doesn't matter that I'm the only one. Doesn't matter at all. So I always thought of that kind of like, okay. But anyway, we are going through to a tangent that doesn't have anything to do with this. But this reminded me of that. Uh, if your writing is unreadable, you will limit the number of people who read and understand your work. It's hard to believe you would choose to limit your readership. Some computer scientists I know tell me people should and will work to understand the results. So, uh, well, I think I'm gonna just go over the highlights in here because uh, it's basically a bunch of evidence and a bunch of recommendations, suggestions that you should be a better writer.
Get
Which,
good.
well, it is good, but that's again, it's kind of like the eat vegetables thing. That if you're not someone that really deeply enjoys eating them, you are eating them because of the peripheral effect of being healthier. It's kind of like an obvious thing, but then very few people do because it requires discipline. It requires disciplined effort, which is hard. If you go to the street, for example, and you go, "Do you think you should know how to communicate in Portuguese better?" Everybody would say yes. Like that would be an unanimous yes. All the country would say yes. Even the criminals would say yes. And then you say, "What are the ways to improve that?" All of them will say something along the lines of reading or in writing. And then you ask them, "Do you do those things constantly?" And then they will say no. And then you're gonna ask, "Do you think you should?" They will say yes. Like again, this is the same thing. Everybody knows this. Nobody does it. But I do I think even though I'm saying this, I think we should put pressure on it. Like uh, this was not the goal of Gabriel, but he he understands that he's making a lot of people ashamed of themselves by writing this thing, right? Because
Right.
he's basically exposing that this is an obvious thing that everybody should do, specifically if you are uh, actually he doesn't even say that, but if you are engineer, you need to know this, and you read this and you just feel ashamed of yourself. That's the purpose of this, right?
Yeah, he's basically saying get good.
It's no, it's worse. He's saying be
He,
better. It's like it's literally melhore. Like you're like there's no way around it. You're gonna feel ashamed. At least I do. Um, so then well, we're gonna have a list at the end, a broadside at the end of this chapter. But in essence, he recommends Element of Style. I haven't read this one, but I read Sense of Style or something. And I didn't read it fully, I think, but I read some of them.
Funny thing, remember that day at work where people were recommending books?
Yeah.
The recommendation that Gabriel puts after that is actually Marcelo's recommendation.
Oh, the Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Yup.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I
I
was
didn't
rereading this.
remember.
Yeah, I was rereading this after that day, and I was like, dude, this is literally that book that he mentioned, like
That's
right
great.
here.
That's very great. So he recommends Elements of Style, and then there is the obvious pearl of omit needless words. This, uh, well, Gabriel knows poetry, so he knows that the semantics of needless is kind of jank because in scientific writing it is more clear what is needless, but in poetry, a needless word a word that would be classified needless on a scientific point of view, when you go to poetry, the unnecessary word has extra semantics attached to it. So you need to be really careful about from which POV are you judging how the necessity of words. Because in less scientific writing, repeating yourself, putting extra words, usually they are there for a particular purpose.
Well, he kind of mentions, he touches on that like two paragraphs down, where he says, "How would you know a word is needless, right?"
Yes, he mentions that at some point.
It's right before the Zen and
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Art of
because
Motorcycle.
I
Yeah.
know what meaning these words means. Uh, yeah, I don't. Did you understand this way? Like, I don't know what this is trying to portray. I haven't read the book, so I don't know in which context this is.
I haven't read it either, but it's talking about a nut is like a ring of metal with a thread inside of it.
Yes.
It's used. You have a screw. You screw it over something that it passes through, and then on the other side, you have a nut which you you thread it through the screw until it presses right against the surface to make it sure it stays in place, right? Because there's nothing else behind the thing because the screw is going through the material, so we need something to hold it in place. That's the thing. But then you have to tighten it to the point where the screw will actually stay in place, but where it won't actually be damaged. If you tighten it too much, you can actually damage the thing.
Oh, he's talking about precision then.
Yes, but the thing is, when you do that by hand, it's not really about precision in the sense of it's a hard thing to do, but it's precision in the sense of it takes practice to know how much is enough, basically.
Yeah, so he's talking about like that type of intuition that usually craftsmen people have, like that they know somehow.
Yeah,
It's like cooking essentially. Like
yes.
how do they know how much salt is enough? They just know. If you were okay, so yeah. Okay, then he talks about the style toward clarity and grace by Joseph Williams. I haven't read any of these recommendations, but well, maybe I should consider that. Sometimes explains where, yeah, avoid passive voice when and then actually the opposite is also true when it's a good idea to use it. Uh, and then also need to learn grammar, right? So this is a very important thing. Read a lot, not only science. So this ties it perfectly with the whole cathedral and bazaar hacker philosophy that we read fiction. Like a lot of hackers also appreciate reading fiction. And I thought that okay, this happened. Okay, another book saying that.
I
Uh,
mean, this is Richard freaking Gabriel. I don't think many people would argue that he's not a hacker.
no, no, I'm saying that there are two books, one from Gabriel, another from Raymond, saying good hackers read fiction. Okay, that in case of Gabriel, he's not specifically targeting fiction, and
He's
Raymond
actually
is
targeting
doing.
yeah, yeah, he's actually targeting poetry.
Yeah, but non-scientific, like reading as a how can I say? Well, Raymond did put fiction explicitly there. But anyway, and then we have poetry being recommended, and then again, poetry as a way to make you adhere to particular properties of writing, I would say, because like again, like compression, avoid adjectives, adverbs, gerunds, and complicated casual structure, and you're gonna learn from that. And that's actually something. How can I say? This is an expected outcome. That's what I would call it because you have the direct outcome. So if you're reading poetry, what would be a direct outcome of that? You're gonna learn unusual words. That's definitely an outcome. However, Gabriel is proposing that it is an expected outcome because by reading poetry, you're gonna have an improvement all the way over there when you're writing a paper, and that's something really hard to measure. And I think that's I have a very hot topic about this, but I want to talk about after we are finished with this book. Well, with today's session.
Okay.
Um, Poets love languages and art sentences in ways you could never imagine, and it doesn't mean absurd or unusual. Sentences that demonstrate the poet's keen interest in minimally stating a complex image or point. And again, this is compression. And then balance between left and right brain thinking. This might come as a surprise, but the best poetry is not new age sentimentality. Contemporary poetry rarely requires a knowledge of Greek mythology or obscure tribal myths or traditions. This can go either way. This could be a good thing or a bad thing.
But I like Greek mythology.
But
uh,
that makes it hard to appreciate something because there are requirements now. Actually, that's always true. There is always a requirement because the first requirement you need to be able to read it. You need to be educated in that language. Second, you need to be able to know how to read. Like because you can know how to spell words in English, for example. So you are educated in English, but you don't know how to read it yet. Maybe you are like a child. And then second, you need to be, and then third, actually, there's a requirement to be able to interpret text, which is actually something not as trivial as it may sound. So there are already requirements on reading all the time. However, I think adding Greek mythology or obscure tribal myth and traditions, although it makes it cooler, it makes it harder to read. For example, I do know Greek mythology, but I don't know to an extent that I think I would be able to catch a very like an epiphany or like a connection that I would never be able to expect. After I had read poetry for a year or so, my technical scientific writing got much better. That's what I'm talking about. This is an expected gain, almost like a complex system. The sum of the parts generates something greater than the sum. And this is very hard to measure. This can go to controversy very easily because how are you going to be able to make the argument? Because if the gain, the unmeasured, the hard to measure gain is subjective, now we're going to go to debates about it because somebody else will say, I read poetry, it didn't help shit on my writing, so I don't know what you're talking about. And then how will we be able to tell that this person is just an ignorant, he didn't even try for real, or actually it is that subjective? So that goes into a very gray area. And that's what I think. I agree with Gabriel, but I only agree with him because I have evidence, right? Let's say that I tried and I didn't have evidence. How would I be able to trust I would be able to trust his word? I would
that is actually fair.
Go. Yeah.
Um, that
I
is
would say,
actually very fair.
I would say that nothing improved it more than did reading poetry. Since I have developed a keen interest in contemporary poetry, my writing skills have continued to improve. And then the best writers, this is another piece of evidence, right? Because he's trying to make it. This argument here is essentially saying, and there is a statistical correlation, right? So these authors also have knowledge outside of scientific writing. Um, Practice writing. Document the last program you wrote. Use a real typesetting system. Produce real documentation. Describe something in a paper you just read. Yeah, this is something. Well, he's going to talk about this later. I can mention it later. Writing takes practice. No, well, again, writing takes practice is important. The best way to understand an idea is to write about it. I think it's the second best way. The first way is to explain to someone else. Um, a good way to practice writing is to write about something you don't understand. If you understand the inheritance and encapsulation, write about it. You will both learn the subject and improve your writing.
I think implementing is also a good way to understand it.
Um,
But then that requires the thing to be implementable to begin with, right?
I there's a couple of ifs. The best way to the implementing is a good way to understand it if you're not vibe coding and you are not copy pasting.
But if you are vibe coding, you are not actually implementing it. You are letting an LLM implement it for you.
But maybe you are depending on the LLM only for parts of it. And I think we should not, like, if you want to understand something, you should not use it at all. Um, well, I guess you can make the argument that I already know how to read a file. Let the LLM generate out that part of the code. Eh, that's a little bit fair. How do you think fiction process writers become good? Naturally includes a lot of writing practice, studying good writing, and working with a teacher. And then he goes to the workshops. I would love to have the time to do this because it's what we do here with the sessions and the book club is a workshop, but for reading and coding. Another workshop would be specifically dedicated for writing, and I think that's a good thing. But I don't have the time for it.
Hmm. That does sound kind of interesting, actually.
You can find like uh, in the past, I already found Brazilian Discord servers that they had workshops for like reading sessions of your own writing. They were not as harsh as Gabriel is suggesting here, but it's a start. And then he goes to describe the benefits of participating on a workshop. Partially, the comments will be harsher because people don't know you, and that's actually a good thing. I find it pretty underwhelming when people don't give me the harshest feedback just because they know me. I think it's the opposite. When you know the person, when you know them, that's when you should be the harshest as possible. Because first, you should, uh, uh, assuming you care about that person, you care about their improvement, you need to give them honest feedback. And second, you have the intimacy, if you know them, to be harsh. Like, it should be less uncomfortable to be harsh. So I don't understand this logic. The only thing that I can see a little bit of a logic is that you don't want to hurt their feelings. But if they are doing something for real, nobody should care about their feelings. If they are doing something for you, they should be caring about making it better, having progress. If it's gonna hurt their feelings or my feelings, I don't give a shit.
It's like it's like if you try not to hurt their feelings because you have an established existing relationship with that person, your relationship cannot possibly be that deep, right? If you're afraid of, you know, upsetting them just by speaking the truth.
I have counterexamples for that, but we can go on that later. And I don't like my cardinal examples, but they exist, and I need to acknowledge them. I recommend that we all started workshops. Yeah, find people who are in your subfield, nearby subfields, even related ones. Hand out the material a few days in advance. Start the comments by having someone summarize the paper. Talk not only about the content of the paper, but also about the writing. If the paper contains a pearl, be harder on it, because if it is an outstanding result that everyone should know, this makes the bar higher, because now having a wider readership that should read it implies less knowledgeable readers. So you should be double down on how you communicate. Um, it is part of your profession to know how to write properly, so act professionally on it. Work on your basic skills. I lost where he said that he said something like, you probably read a paper every day. And that's something that I do not do, but I know I should be doing. And again, I felt ashamed. Um, where he said that? He said that somewhere.
Uh,
Maybe if I work day, I search for daily. No, every day. Oh, and then we have the broadside, right? Which is essentially a bullet point list of everything he said. Oh, here it is. If you're a top-notch computer scientist, you probably read technical papers nearly every day. I don't. I feel ashamed. But I need to work on that. I need to work on that.
you don't.
I think I do, actually. I think I do. You know when you are doing not great, when every time, like when you start repeating your references. At least that's for me. When I notice that I'm starting to repeat my references, that's when I make a mental note that you're not doing good. That's
You
not good
should broaden
enough.
your horizons.
You're using the same references over and over and over again. The references are great, but the fact that you keep reusing them means that your arsenal is not good enough. And the only way to fix that is reading more. There's no way around that. So again, this chapter is essentially making me feel ashamed of I need to write and read more, and I know that, but it's tough. It's tough. At least for me, it's tough. Um,
I
so
like reading.
I don't actually. The act of reading doesn't bring me joy, but the knowledge that I acquire doing the act does.
You know, a funny thing is that I used to have the habit of like, when you buy food, there's an ingredients listing.
Yeah.
I used to have the habit of reading that for literally everything in the house. Like whatever I could get my hands on, I would just read the list of ingredients.
Okay, so you're probably very knowledgeable about I don't know calories and quantities and whatever.
I was usually focused on the things that go into making a particular thing. I did look at the nutritional facts as well, but my focus was usually on the ingredients actually.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know that. That's good. Okay, so we have 2 minutes, 1 minute left. Do you have anything else to add?
It took me until the broadside to realize that his initials are actually RPG, and I find that funny for some reason.
Oh, Richard P. Gabriel. Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah.
funny. Yeah, I didn't notice that as well, but that's cool. Yeah, I should. Man, I need to improve. I need to improve my shit. I'm getting. Well, I was always behind, but now I feel even more behind. Uh, yeah, I think this was pretty good. Um, so we read about getting our job. people getting fearful about losing their jobs, changing experiences changing for the worse because of new technology. We need to explain better what we do, and we need to read and write more and participate in workshops. I think
Pretty
that's pretty
solid
much it.
advice, I would say.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna finish the recording now.